I'm sorry about before. And I'm sorry about your soldiers.
No need for that. You'll have a hard time getting up every morning if you dwell on that too much. Machines don't do that, and if we want to destroy them, neither can we.
I don't know. No! No, no!
Oh, hey, look, the little... Yeah, come on. This kid is clearly a Terminator. Look at him. Look at this psycho. Get away from me! Nice. Oh, it's not going down! It's not going down! Baron! Help! At first glance, there really isn't anything special about Terminator Resistance. The graphics are mediocre, voice acting solid, if unspectacular, and the gameplay uninspired at best. Much like the original 1984 film, which you might mistake at first for a stereotypical action B-movie, you might mistake this game for just another subpar video game adaptation. But if you can get over the somewhat rough exterior, you come to discover a real diamond lying in the nuclear-blasted rubble. A game with clever writing, rich environments, and, most importantly, a game that finally does a battered and abused franchise the justice it deserves. You are immediately thrown into the front lines of the future war, the war for human termination. And damn, this game sure doesn't give you very long to get acclimated to your surroundings. A Terminator is already at your throat, and just when things are looking pretty bleak, you hear a familiar slogan.
Listen to me if you want to live. Get under that bus, now!
It's not just a neat throwback. It's a great way to immediately invest the player in the story, cutting down on the usual lengthy exposition and tutorial segments games usually start you off with these days, instead throwing you right into the nuclear fire, so to speak. You very quickly come to understand the setting, who the main protagonist is, and the story you're about to embark on. The first scene you witness, the full horrors of the Annihilation Line as it rolls across Los Angeles, which makes the stakes perfectly clear for the rest of the game. And things only get more interesting and desperate from there. The pacing of the story is superb, and as you go from safe house to safe house, from one mission to the next, you meet various survivors and freedom fighters, all with their own story to tell. This is all punctuated by a script that takes itself refreshingly seriously for a movie adaptation. There's no winking at the camera here, no humor directed at the franchise itself just for the sake of a cheap laugh, and you mostly travel through a bleak and depressing world full of bleak, depressing people. My God, you're depressing.
I like to blame the machines for that.
You win the award for most depressing side character
They were given a second chance.
in any video game.
You're still out there waiting for.
That said, there are some lighthearted and even heartfelt moments, which fits perfectly with the tone of the first two films in a way that never feels forced. Games based on movie franchises usually try to cash in on their film counterparts in very contrived ways, but this game is constantly forging its own path through the Terminator universe. You never cross paths with any of the film's characters, are never shoehorned into missions or scenes you have no business being in. The story does parallel certain events in Terminator lore, but it never detracts or subverts the already established narrative that fans love, unlike some of the modern films which totally alter, retcon, and demean the first two films which started it all. All this is a long-winded way of saying I don't think the story gets enough credit. Sure, it's not Shakespeare by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a well-constructed plot without the usual plot holes or contrivances abounding in a story about time travel. And sure, much like the films, if you really sit down and think about it, the circular logic of the plot might not completely add up. I mean, If Reese is John Connor's father, and Connor sends him in the past specifically to achieve his own conception, then how was the original John Connor ever born? Wouldn't there have to have been a timeline where...
I didn't build the fucking thing!
Okay.
Right. Thinking about this too much. On the whole, it's a well-conceived and meticulously planned story that somehow manages to stay completely respectful to its heritage, which, if the history of movie franchise games has taught us anything, is a lot more difficult than it sounds. The graphics of Terminator Resistance, it's clear they went in a different direction than most movie games here, striving for a less hyper-realistic approach in favor of more stylized visuals. At first glance, this seems a little out of place with the setting. However, I quickly got used to it, and after a while I even came to appreciate the art design, especially from a character model point of view, as each major character has their own style unique to them that really helps you get a feel for their personality. Also, the various Terminators you fight all look phenomenal, especially the skeletal T-800s and their several different variations. The Infiltrators, the big bads of the franchise, are also well done, a particularly cool feature being how their clothes and flesh are gradually blown away as you battle it out with them. What really helps the somewhat underwhelming graphics, though, is that clearly a lot of thought and effort has been put into the actual level designs. Each stage, from your safe houses to the ruined cityscapes you explore, are bursting with a surprising amount of detail. There's collectibles galore to be discovered, from tradable resources to weapons to notes which help flesh out the story. All this helps you really get immersed in a game where visual realism isn't its strong suit. This is where Terminator Resistance falls a little short of the mark, I'm afraid. Which is a shame, because I have to wonder how great this game really could have been if they just spent some time making the combat as exhilarating as in the movies. The action in the films, at least the first two, are punctuated with a frenetic pace and a reality that never seems to let off the throttle. As it stands, the game is a more or less mediocre first-person shooter with little else to commend it. Sure, there's some nifty gadgets and weapons modifications, but for the most part, you're just pointing your plasma rifle at things and hoping they don't kill you. On the plus side, enemy variation is a welcome distraction. Besides the Terminators, you will encounter spider bots and turrets, gargantuan T-34s, as well as the infamous hunter killers. And while these can be fun, even exciting enemies to try and figure out how to destroy, it doesn't change the fact that the controls are clunky and the UI confusing and unintuitive, forcing you to fight yourself as much as you're fighting Skynet. What? Oh, come on! I was right there! I had the knife on him and everything! What happened? Okay, where's this hunter killer? Oh my god, why am I taking out adrenaline when I need to be... Why does it switch those items out on me? Fuck. I don't know how many times I accidentally threw a pipe bomb when I meant to use first aid, or had my first aid switched out for something else entirely right in the midst of battle, dooming me to an otherwise avoidable death. Now, you might argue, Raskolnikov, you rascally purveyor of video game wisdom, perhaps it's not the game's fault. Perhaps, though the notion seems absurd, you had one too many double bourbons, and it's you who's the problem.
To forget.
Well, I have to admit, in my weaker moments, the thought did cross my mind. But what's the old saying? Once is an accident, twice a coincidence and 3 times a pattern. Every time I fumble with the controls, the less I believe in my own wrongdoing, and the more I'm inclined to believe there's something unintuitive or unresponsive about the control scheme. All that taken into account, though, it's still a fun game. These issues mostly don't ruin the experience. It would just be nice if I felt more like this. And a little less like this guy here. Run and apply medkits. Yeah! Did I seriously die from that? What? Oh, come on! Now, normally my reviews would end right about now with a snappy little summary and maybe a joke that probably doesn't land. But for this one, I'm adding an extra bonus segment, a category that, given the nature of the beast we are discussing, I consider just as important, if not more so, than everything we've laid out so far.
Rivers, since Pacific Division no longer exists, you will now answer to me. That makes you a part of TechCom. Congratulations. No more sitting around waiting for Skynet to come to you.
TechCom.
Over here we go out.
If there's anything about Terminator Resistance that it gets absolutely right, spot on, sticks the landing, it's this. This game feels like Terminator. The music sounds like it's ripped straight out of the 80s to early 90s. The guns sound like they did back then. The people even talk like they did back then. You can tell this game was made by fans of the original films, for fans of the original films. It hits all the right nostalgia notes, yet somehow doesn't feel heavy-handed or forced, all the while telling a unique story of its own. If this game were an infiltrator, it would fool Mr. James Cameron himself into thinking it was human.
But these are new. They look human. Sweat, bad breath, everything. Very hard to spot.
Well said, Michael Biehn. And honestly, I can't think of a better compliment for a game based on a movie franchise than that.